All right, perfect. So we'll go ahead and get started. And again, apologize for those technical difficulties there. That was totally my fault, but appreciate the patience. So good evening, everyone, and welcome to our informational webinar on the Larimer County Community Mitigation Grant. I'm Josh Roberts, Mitigation Coordinator with Larimer County Office of Emergency Management, and myself and Camille Millard. We're going to be hosting the webinar this evening. Camille, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, howdy y'all. I've probably worked with a lot of you as I was the grant coordinator for this last year, but I am passing the baton to Josh this year. I work in the office of Larimer County and I do preparedness and resiliency work, which is a lot of social capital and public outreach. So I'll still be around, especially since this grant focused so heavily on that social capital aspect.
Awesome. Thanks, Camille. And thanks y'all for joining us again. Um, First up, we just want to give you the purpose and agenda for the webinar this evening. So if you can see on the screen, really our intent is to provide you all as potential applicants with information and insights to the grant program. We'll walk through the application process and the application form, and we're going to give you an opportunity for Q&A at the end. And really ultimately, Camilla and I and our team at OEM, we really just want to help make this grant opportunity approachable to you guys, our communities that out in the county. So you can see the little bullet points there. We're going to discuss quickly just an overview of the program. We'll talk about eligibility and limitation things. As I mentioned, we'll go over our application and we're going to discuss the evaluation criteria that we're going to use to score these proposals, these applications. There's a couple of miscellaneous grant administration items that we'll let you know about. We also want to showcase some previous projects just to give you some examples of successful projects in the past. We'll show you a slide that has some information on important dates and other resources, and then we want to offer you an opportunity to ask some questions. So that's what we're going to go over today. We're hoping to do this within an hour. Hopefully sooner, but we'll be monitoring the time to respect y'all's time this evening. So first up, some webinar administration items. We're recording this webinar, and the reason why is we're planning to post it to our webpage, our Community Mitigation Grant webpage, and I'll show you that later in the next few business days so that others who weren't able to make it this evening can go back and review it, or if you wanted to go back and you couldn't remember exactly what, maybe what we had said, then you can go back and review it. So the chat and the Q&A tool. So quick heads up, if you look at your Zoom webinar window, you should have access to the Q&A tool within Zoom. And what that is you should be able to ask a question. And you should also be able to see other questions that are being asked that if it's the similar question you have, you can upvote it, and that will let us know, kind of gives us a heads up on questions you might have, at a glance so that we can get you an answer. So please feel free to use that Q&A tool. You guys don't have the ability to share your video or anything like that. So we're really focusing on that Q&A tool, and it's going to help us log these questions too, so that we can, if we don't have an answer immediately, we at least know what it is. We can get that answer back to you. So heads up on the Q&A tools there. Also, I think what I'm finding out is if you raise your hand, then I have an ability to unmute you or allow you to chat or something like that. So for any major issues, raise your hand and we can address it and get to you. So yeah. Also, last thing I'll mention, if there are any technical issues, then certainly our apologies for anything that we might have done, but we'll definitely visit with you offline. And so we'll make sure that you have our contact information. It's most of you probably know Camille and I, but certainly always feel free to give us a shout, shoot us an email, and we can chat through anything offline if you'd like. All right. So first up, the program overview. So some of you might know this background and this history about the program, but some of you may not. But this is actually the third cycle. and we're on annual cycles. So 2024 is the third cycle of this grant program, and it was started in 2022. So the first couple of years were more just kind of figuring things out. And now that we're in the third year, we'll show you a slide too that it talks about some changes from last year to this year. Every year, we want to try to improve this grant program, certainly with respect to how easy it is for you guys, how useful it is for y'all. We want to try to help provide this tool to get you some funding support that you might need, and in a way that's really approachable and somewhat easy for you, while at the same time, being fair to all and being a good steward of taxpayer dollar. So, third grant cycle of the program. And, ultimately, fundamentally, this grant program was established and created on the back of research in disaster science. So, and we even point to some of this research on our story map that we'll show you later. But there's research that indicates mitigation has a positive benefit cost, which means you spend for every dollar spent on mitigation activity, you're saving multiple dollars in future avoided losses. And there's research that indicates this. A lot of nuance there, but in general, it's got a positive benefit cost. It's a good, smart financial investment. There's also additional research that shows how social capital and good social capital, enhancing social capital, it improves the resilience of not just yourself and your household, but for our community at large. And that, Camille referenced, some of the programs that Camille leads there, and that's really rooted, a lot in that research as well. So this program, if you were to survey emergency management offices across the nation, this is kind of a novel, approach here, but I think we're seeing other offices, take these kind of approaches. So kudos to the team at Larimer County, for recognizing this, a couple of years ago and building something that's helpful. Maya, just saw your question. A great question. So Maya wanted me to explain what we mean by social capital. So, and I'll paraphrase here, but essentially social capital are the ties that we share as members of the same community. Community can be defined in different ways, but it's ties that we share that bond us together. So whether it's place-based things, like we're all living in the same area, in the same neighborhood, cultures that we share, language that we share, values that we share, those ties there that bond us together, that's social capital. And so the more that we can get to know one another, get to know our neighbors, build that trust, it only improves that social capital. And, many of you probably have heard the old adage, it takes a village, and it's really sort of a similar concept. We, in this fight against disaster, we truly are all in it together. And so the more that we recognize that on the front end, and strengthen those ties that bond us together, then the more we'll be able to respond and recover from it. So thanks for the point of clarification there, Maya.
It's definitely a fancy way of saying the networks and the friendships we have, and almost a way that they're trying to measure the intangible of our friendships and how we build those. So a lot of the programs I work with, some of you, I see your names in the chat, are a part of our Larimer Connects Community Hub program. And a lot of all of that is about networking and building this concept of social capital through community members. So yeah, definitely a huge part of this grant and how we're getting into the grant criteria, which we'll talk about a little bit later.
Yeah, thanks, Camille. I probably should have deferred that question to you. So thanks for adding that there. The other thing I mentioned in terms of an overview is that we feel and see that this awarded funding that we can award through this grant program, it's not just that investment, that smart financial investment in mitigation activity that has that positive benefit cost return, but it's an investment in the building of that social capital that Camille just talked about, which ultimately helps us manufacture more and enhanced and improved community resilience. So that's really ultimately the intent. And We also recognize that the cost of some of this work, this mitigation work, depending on what it is, it can be, a little pricey. And so there's a barrier of entry, to performing this important risk reduction work. And so, the county and in our leadership and in our office and with this grant program, we recognize that and we want to help remove that upfront and sort of entry level cost barrier at the community scale for this work. So what's changed from last year? I want Camille to address some of this, but first off, y'all, I've got to say, so many of you know Camille, and Camille, really spearheaded this administration of this program last year. And Camille, you did a great job. And as I mentioned, every year, that's kind of how our office, works. We want to improve all our programs, and we're always keeping an eye out towards, improvement. So Camille, if I can just give you like a public kudos here. You did a great job. And a lot of, these changes that we're implementing this year are, things that Camille had seen that would be an improvement. So really, truly thanks for your work and, for helping to make this the best thing we can for our community. So Camille,
Thank you. He's legally obligated to say that every time we switch. So, but no, our biggest thing, I think the thing that everyone's here is, well, how much money's in the pool this year, right? That's the big question. And we have great news in that our funding pool has increased. It's almost doubled actually. So we have about $100,000 this year from the gracious courtesy of our commissioners who added to that fund. And every year we know that this isn't a guaranteed fund, but the work that we did over the past 2 years paired with the stories and the photos and the work that y'all do with collaborating and bringing together as community is what really led to us being able to get more funding and make sure that we're giving it to those who need it most. So excellent job both on your side. So as a kudos to me, a kudos to y'all for wanting to collaborate this and, take on extra projects in our very busy everyday lives. But I know I was just such a pleasure to be primary point of contact with, but you'll have to Josh here is new primary. So all main collaboration will be run through Josh. Main questions or general everyday admin of that is going to be Josh's wheelhouse, but I am still going to be around and I would love to still come out and do site visits. We did discover last year as we gain new projects every year, it's quite difficult for just one person to, visit everyone, check on the site visits, do all of that background admin. So that's kind of the new position I'm taking in with this. So either one of us can come out, or if you prefer me, I'll come out. But either or, definitely just my email is still around. The biggest thing that Josh changed a lot is our application. And you'll notice that from the application from last year compared to this year is it's streamlined a lot. And the main aspect is that the application pairs a lot better with our criteria rating now. It's a very streamlined transfer process for us. So when we're rating these things, it's a lot easier for us. So we're actually going to go through a mock application now so you can just kind of see the big changes, and that kind of builds on that admin tools and templates and that evaluation criteria. So the next big thing is Josh put together this beautiful story map, which I'm sure at this point most of us have either seen or heard, but it is fantastic. And we're going to take an opportunity because it really highlights some of these larger projects that we funded last year. So if maybe this is your first application cycle and you're not really sure which direction you'd like to go, this is a great place to get ideas on what a project might look like for your community based off of what similar communities did last year. And we'll talk about this a little bit later, but if you're wanting to speak to someone who maybe did a similar project, we definitely can help try to facilitate that and get you in contact to ask some more one-on-one questions about what it was like to, get reimbursement grant style funding, or how the management of this over a year-long project worked. So if that's something you're interested in, definitely just email myself or Josh to get more information on that. But I think ultimately a very large kudos to our county leadership, our commissioners, and our director of emergency management here, Lori Hodges, because really they're fighting for this funding for us to continue to be able to do, this good work and coordinate it on our side, and then y'all coordinate it and bring your community together on your side. So a big collaborative effort, and we're very thankful for having such an engaged community members like yourself that are willing to be at a webinar at 6 p.m. on Thursday afternoon. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Camille. Appreciate that. So now we'll kind of transition into some of the structure of the grant program here. So first up, let's talk about eligibility and limitations, kind of some basic stuff. So the first thing I'll mention is in terms of applicant eligibility. So eligible applicants include community groups, local nonprofit organizations, charitable foundations. And so note that term community group. So that's somewhat of a loose definition. And it's really part of our intent to help, you guys in your communities in general access, this funding. So entities that are representing the community, it can vary. We've had, the person who's actually submitting the proposal and the application and who would receive the funding. That could potentially be a volunteer fire department, a fire district, an HOA, road association, road rec association. And even, if there is no formal or semi-formal organization in place, as long as there's some sort of substantiating evidence that it is the community speaking with one voice, we want to try to get funding, to that community for this project. So if you aren't necessarily, or if you don't represent a formal HOA or something, that's okay. If the whole community is speaking with one voice on this project, we want to see your proposal and we want to work with you to try to get you some of this funding support. So just a quick note to that there. And I'll say as a general rule, there's a ton in the social services fabric of the Larimer County community. There's a ton of nonprofits that are just doing some tremendous work. Our funding, we want to try to target community scale, like smaller sort of grassroots efforts, if you will, that's, evidence and neighbors coming together. They're going to take priority over if we have for example, a larger nonprofit that's submitting a project, that if they work with a few folks in the community, even if it does benefit the whole community, what we want to try to target, and our preference is to that grassroots effort relative, to all the projects. So just some keynotes there about applicant eligibility. Some more eligibility items, and some of this is pretty standard. You probably it's no surprise here, but projects have to be located in Larimer County. They got to benefit Larimer County communities. Ultimately, it's your tax dollars here. Projects must mitigate the risk from one or more hazards. Obviously wildfire, flooding, that is top in our risk profile, here in Larimer County. And so those are going to be the projects that we see in terms of what, the hazard that's mitigated here. But, we don't necessarily, this isn't necessarily a wildfire grant, right? So obviously there's a lot of risk in terms of wildfire, here in our county. So we're going to see a lot of those proposals, but just in general, it's got to mitigate risk from one or more hazards. The next item there, any single project that we fund, the max award for that project in any given year is $10,000. That doesn't mean it's a $10,000 or nothing, award. Certainly it can be less than $10,000, but the maximum at this time, it remains $10,000 for any single project award. At the bottom on this slide, you'll see there what's not eligible. We kind of worked through some of these things over the past few years, but salaries or what we call staff capacity, that's not an eligible project. So we can't pay for staff salary or for staff time working on things. Staff time of an organization. Project planning expenses, so things like a community wildfire protection plan, or if you wanted to monetize your time on crafting the proposal as a planning expense, like those things aren't eligible. We want this funding to go to work, to go to projects, right? And then road maintenance and repair. That's not an eligible project. Now, some slight nuance here. And if you've seen our story map, you've seen, another project. We have funded there's a road that would flood in high rainfall events and cause access egress issues. And so to mitigate, that risk and that hazard, some stream diversion, installation of a high water crossing, that's not necessarily a repair thing so much or a maintenance thing so much. It's more mitigating that risk. And, that kind of project coupled with some aspect of bringing neighbors together, whether it's heavy folks with heavy equipment pitching in and helping out, coupled with a preparedness fair or some kind of workshop to talk about things in general, like those things, coupled together would be an eligible project. So hope that makes sense there. Here's another couple of items, and these have a little bit of nuance here. So applicants can submit applications for only one project per grant cycle. And really that's intended to target, when we say applicants, we're meaning communities. So it's more like the geo reference there of a neighborhood or of a community. There may be multiple organizations within a community, but what we really want to target, and certainly what we're going to look at relative to all the other, applications, is, one project coming from, that community, if you will. Another item, applicants can be awarded twice in a 3-year period. And really both of these items here, we put the why there on the slide, and here's ultimately our intent is, we want to help build, some agency within the community for that longer term self-sufficiency in this, mitigation risk reduction work. So we want to make sure that the funding that we provide it doesn't supplant, anything, but it's supplemental to things that you want to do in your community and that are already doing. And, additionally, we also want to create opportunities and ensure some access to communities all across, the county. So we want to spread, some of this funding out. And ultimately that why there is why we have some of these limitations. Now, that said, Camille and I, we do our very best to try to find our way to a yes for you guys. And so, and we fully recognize that there may be perspectives you have, that needs that you have, that kind of fall within a gray area with some of this eligibility things. So, if that does happen, we want to talk to you and we want to try to see if we can figure it out. Ultimately, like I mentioned earlier, we got to be fair to all and we got to be good stewards of taxpayer dollar, but, never hesitate. If you have an idea or a question, or if it doesn't necessarily, some of our grant program and our rules don't fit exactly neatly to what you need in your communities, then call us and we want to try to do our best to figure it out. Kind of moving on to the next topic on the agenda. So we accept applications via an online form, and you can see this online form on our website, on our webpage. A quick little caveat or digression here. When we post a recording of this webinar, we'll also post these slides on that same webpage. And, if at any point in time you're not familiar with our webpage or don't know where the form is, just ask us, and we will get that information to you. But really, our webpage, all this information is there, so you can access these things on our website, from our website. Application period is going to close March 15th, 2024, at 11:59 p.m. So once that clock turns 12 a.m., March 16th, we're going to stop accepting applications. And that's, we want to be fair, to all. This takes time. This takes effort to put together. And so, that's also why we want to do this webinar, to help you guys, know what we're looking for. And we're going to have to do some scoring and, evaluating these proposals. And we want to make sure that we get, some intent to awards to those selected communities for funding back to you in a timely fashion, so you can, plan the work. So, put that on the calendar, 11:59 p.m., March 15th, 2024. It's the last minute that we'll accept applications. Another, pro tip here, helpful little insight is, our application is an online form. So you go to it, it asks you questions and you type in the information, but definitely recommend saving your proposal or your answers to the application questions outside of the form. So put it in a Word doc, save it to your desktop, hold on to that stuff before you hit submit, just in case there's any technical issues with us receiving the form. And if there is, then certainly we'll work with you and accept it via email. just as long as those application questions are answered. On our webpage, you may have noticed when you click the link to the application form, on that form, there's also going to be a downloadable PDF that provides you in advance all of the questions that we ask in the form. And it's linked here in the slides that we'll post in a couple of days or our website too. So that is another tool to help make sure you get your proposal sort of lined out before you go to the form, but save it outside the form just as your record, just in case. So with that, what we want to do now is walk through the form. Can we do that? The application form?
Like that.
Yeah. Stand by all. Yeah. Work. Cool. Let's see. I'm gonna stop sharing the slides and then I'll share the form so that you can see it. There we go. I got too many screens over here, y'all. Oh, here we go. So you should be able to see my internet browser. And so I'm going to type in here larimer.gov/emergency. Just show you how to navigate to the Community Mitigation Grant webpage and the application form here real quick. So right here on this site, you look in this Mitigating Against Hazards box, Community Mitigation Grant Program. Click that link. And here's our webpage that references all things Community Mitigation Grant. Right here in this section, 2024 grant cycle, up underneath it, how to apply here. There's the application. And so it pulls up the form. Here is the PDF document that you can download. So you can click that, download it. It gives you all the questions on the form in advance. And you'll notice just some of the basic eligibility items again, just some of the important dates there. Another link back to the web page. But it's pretty simple. You just go through it and answer the questions. So you hit next. As you work with your planning team and your community develop your proposal, give it a project name. And I'm just going to go through and show you some tests here. Some fields are required, some aren't. What hazard would be mitigate? Here's where you get to choose or type in the hazard. Maybe it's multiple. How much funding is being requested? You've gone through and gotten some cost estimates. We've come up with some reasonable estimates here. So you know your total cost, and we ask you to.
$7,329.
That was very specific, Camille. Thanks. Yeah, there you go. The grantee, if awarded.
Me.
Camille's neighborhood. Next. Primary point of contact. I'm going to use Camille. Millard.
It's fine. I am kind of a leader in my community, so that makes
phone number 867-5309. Extra points for who catches that reference. Let's say Josh, it says the alternate POC. Payment address. So this is going to be connected to our financial systems. Ultimately, when you are awarded, we'll need a W-9, things like that. And we'll set you up on our financial system. All of that to come later on, after any awards are given out. But we want to make sure these things are set. Pennsylvania Avenue. Location of the project. So here we give us an idea. Think about a dot on a map or a polygon, that you draw on a map, where's the project located? So you can just pick a physical address if you'd like, parcel number, a road intersection, just some kind of location description. If you want to get super fancy, put a map together for us, take a screenshot of Google Earth, send us that file. We just want to know a geo reference where your project is going to be located, not where you live or where the the community like a rec center, the community office, or anything like that. We want to know where the project's going to be located. Um, uh, section of Road 1 and Highway 2. Scope. So here, give us a fairly detailed description of your project. And, this is where we also want to see the budget narrative. We want to basically understand the money you're asking, us for via this grant proposal, what's it going to be used for? So tell us what you want to do, cover the basics, and tell us what you need the funds for. Goals and outcomes. This is kind of another thing that we want to be sure that's addressed here. Your project, it's going to lead to something. It's going to do something, for you in terms of risk reduction, improvement of social capital. So come up with what's your goal of the project? What are your outcomes that you're hoping to accomplish with this project? Yeah, and I'm not mentioning here too. Please don't be scared by these questions at all. We want to make this easy. We don't want to what's the word? We don't want to dissuade anyone, from accessing these grant funds because the application seems too complicated. Just,
We're not
tell-
going to gatekeep this funding from
Right.
y'all. So if you have questions or you need more clarification beyond this webinar, don't feel afraid to reach out. Be like, what exactly are you looking for in the scope? And the scope is pretty important because that's what we're able to fund you based off of what you put in the scope. So if things change down the line and it's not in the scope, which we'll get into a little bit later, go ahead and make sure you email us that. So the scope is probably the most important section out of this whole application.
Yep. Yeah. Thanks, Camille. And these kind of questions, they're gonna do a couple of things. One, they're gonna help us tell this story of this work that you're doing, that this program is doing. They're also gonna help us in our offices, our team's review of these proposals. Because if these things are listed pretty clearly, then it makes those things go a lot faster. So, and we want to be expedient for you. Same thing, with the need, tell us why these funds are needed, not necessarily that, why they're wanted, if that makes sense. So help us be able to tell your story, on your behalf, to others. These next, these have to be
Yeah.
required.
Just put NA.
Lots of good stuff. Yeah, I recommend not just
Yeah.
putting these things in there, be a little bit more specific.
Do as we say, not as we do.
Right. Because now, so these next questions here, you'll note that these are sort of directly referenced to our evaluation criteria. And I'll point that out in a minute, but we're showing you our evaluation criteria here and how we're going to evaluate these proposals, how we're going to score them. So right directly, to that. And this application hopes to kind of, make that connection a little bit easier.
He's
And this next box, here is, we, as we, receive proposals, we're gonna have to evaluate them relative to all the other proposals that we receive. Every year, and tell me if I'm wrong, but I think we've received more proposal in terms of funding requests than what we had funding to give, than what our total pool was, which is which is, great in the sense that that also provided justifiable reasoning for us to increase this pool for this cycle. That said, there might be an occasion to where if we see you asking for 10,000 and we can't fund, every proposal that's being asked, and we might find that there may be a project or two that's important to fund and we want to fund, but we also want to fund this other one. So we might call you and say, we see you ask for 10,000. Would 5,000 work? Would 8,000 work? Would 7,349? Because that's what you list in your budget. And that just helps us have an ability to apply this funding support, to more folks. So we want to try to find our way to some degree of yes, for all of you guys here. So if you feel like it for sure, no, we need 9,589 and can't take a penny less, then indicate that to us. We need 10,000, can't take a penny less, indicate that to us. If you do feel like, what, we could probably get by with 6,000, but 7,000, that would just fund that last little thing, that would be great. But we could take others if others need it, then tell us that, as well. So we saw in that previous form, page there, I put, please see the attachment that I'll email to Josh. So this is any letters of support that you receive from members of the community, your local fire district or fire department, other partner organizations that you work with. Send us those letters of support. That will just help strengthen your application, and that we see that it was a collaborative thing in terms of crafting your proposal. If there's particular risk-related info, or like I mentioned earlier, a map or something, any other document that you think would speak to and help the strength of your proposal, just email it to me and we'll drop it in your file, and we'll you look at that, consider that, as we review these things. So that's it. Then you hit submit. We get notified of your proposal submission. Within 24 hours of that submission, 24 business hours, we're gonna try to send you a copy of the application that you submitted, just to acknowledge that we've received it. If you haven't received that acknowledgement email, then let us know. Give myself or Camille a shout, and we'll go in the system to make sure that we got your proposal and try to troubleshoot or work through any issues there. Anything to add there, Camille?
No, but that's definitely the best way, especially if you're March 15th at 11:59 or like application within that 24 hours, you should still get that acknowledgement that you applied, and that way we can make sure that even if you reach out on the 17th and you're like, hey, I haven't heard back from you, you're not disqualified, because we can go through our system and show, okay, this is what went wrong a little bit. So best way to make sure that all of the applications get counted is to check for that confirmation email that we will send to you. It's not coming from Google, it's us sending y'all the application.
Yeah. And another reason, thanks, Camille. And another reason to save your proposal and your application question answers outside of the form, just in case there is an issue, you didn't get that acknowledgement, you submitted it, and then we can, okay, well, let's accept it via email. Can you send us, something else? So we'll file it. What we want to do is, once the application period closes, we're gonna huddle, as an office and go through that scoring there, evaluate the proposals, make some selections on who we intend to award, and we want to announce, to everyone, go through all that process before May 1st, that our awards and who we want to provide funding support to, who we can provide funding support to. So let me go back. Now that we've showed you the application form, let me go back to the slides. Okay, now let's talk evaluation criteria. And we'll show you the actual criteria in a minute, and we'll show you where to go that you can see that. ultimately what we want to make sure that you guys know that what is baked heavily into the structure of our evaluation criteria is this community support, communities coming together, community engagement with your project. So that social capital piece, and we're going to give preference, relative to other proposals that we receive, to projects that have multiple stakeholders with a significant, large community buy-in and participation, for all those things, that we've talked about earlier. We really want to, because of that research and because, of what our ultimate office goals are here as your emergency, management team, we want to help reward that neighbors helping neighbors, because we know what that means, in disaster response and recovery. So here's the evaluation criteria, at least the main buckets. So number one, overall contribution to community resilience and risk reduction as a result of this project. Number two, community involvement and buy-in, both for the project and for future mitigation efforts. We talked about earlier that longer term self-sufficiency there. Number three, the partnerships that are created or strengthened during the planning of the project. So are we getting folks together here? And now let me share our webpage, and I want to show you exactly where you can see these evaluation criteria, how we're going to score these, and some of that detail here. So stand by. All right, so if I go back to the our Community Mitigation Grant Program webpage, you scroll down a little bit and you'll see these accordion tabs here that you can expand. Additional eligibility detail, right up underneath it, grant criteria. So here is where we're telling you what we want to see in your proposal. And if you remember back to the application form there, we ask these direct questions. So please speak to these when you're crafting your proposal, because that's how we're going to score them. We put, a lot of thought and effort into this criteria and how it's fair and how it's going to accomplish those goals that we want for everyone. So right there. And if there's any questions, about it, again, another plug, give us a shout, and we're going to help you the best we can. All right, back to anything to add on the evaluation criteria?
My only thing is, if maybe you're not 100% sure on the projects you want and you're not necessarily comfortable reaching out to one of us, you can see our 22 and 23 grant awardees right there, and maybe you peruse those and you recognize that someone in those communities. Definitely, speak to one of them and see what their experience was going through this grant application process. So it's all very it shows exactly what communities and how much we awarded them right there on that website. So just click through that section.
Yeah, awesome. So real quick, I'm going to breeze through some of these fairly standard grant administration items because I want to get to that point that Camille just made and show you where you can see some example projects. So first up, this grant program, it's a reimbursement grant thing. So as a general rule, so if you're awarded, you spend the money, you substantiate, that expense, that proof of payment, and then we're going to give you, that reimbursement. There may be, in an exigent circumstance, as you can't put upfront that capital for your project, we're going to try to work with you. Even in the past, we've acquired equipment and provided that to the community. That's not the general rule. That's an exception, and it's only on an exigent circumstance. But just know we want to try to, help out and get you what you need. If selected for an award, so you put in your application, we'll review them. If we want to award you, then we're going to send you a letter. We're going to tell you we intend to award you. It's called an intent to award letter. Then at that point, it's up to you at this X amount, for this general purpose. And at that point, you've got to essentially enter into an agreement with us. So we're going to ask you to sign something, contract agreement style. And once that's done and we receive that, then that's when we lock you in as let's move forward with the project. We want to award you. Speaking of moving forward with the project, after that's happened, once it's locked in, before any project work begins, we're gonna ask, and we ask that you do a project kickoff meeting with your community and the stakeholders, that this project is gonna affect. And, we ask that you let us know about that kickoff meeting. We want to try to show up and support you in the project and your community. Don't feel like you've got to work around our schedule. Just let us know when that is, and we want to try to be there to support you. Either myself or Camille or both of us or someone else in the office. We're going to do the best we can to support you in that effort. Another few items here, pretty standard, but if your project, we understand things change. But if your project does change from your initial application, your scope, your budget, what we agreed to. If it does change and you need to kind of go in a different direction or buy something else or, contract for another service that still meets it and you feel like it's reasonable, let us know before you make that expense, so that we can review it, approve it, and authorize you to do that expense so that you get reimbursed. If you make the change on the fly, spend that money on the fly, and it's different from what our agreement was, then we might struggle a little bit there, to reimburse you. So if you're not sure, then let us know and we'll work through it as best we can, but just know that. Also, ultimately, when you get to the point project's complete and you're ready to be reimbursed, when you request that reimbursement, we're going to ask for things like receipts or proof of payment to substantiate that expense for that intended purpose. We're also going to ask you for a quick little final report of the project. And we also are going to ask you for photos and videos of the project and the project activity before, during, and after. And we're probably gonna put together like a little form or something that just help ease that ask. But a lot of that is to just help tell your story here, so heads up on that. Another item here to mention is that any project that we award and there's activity that occurs on private property, then we want to make sure that that property owner allows and permits this project. So standard, right? Makes a ton of sense. And so what that may mean is if you do have work on private property, we want to see a signed letter that from them that authorizes it, that they know, give us that contact information, so that we can talk to them if we need. So just know that most of our projects, I think, have been on community property, but if there is work or activity that occurs on private property, we got to make sure that the property owner is aware of it. Also, just kind of general thing, we're going to try to do a site visit to your project during or after the best we can. And so we may ask for that for each project. And of course, we reserve the right, if we need a little bit of detail or clarification on some things, we're going to ask you. So please help us, help you in some of those things. So back to Camille's point about showing some example projects, and I know I'm getting the little low
Cutting
on
it
time here.
close.
Let me share the webpage. If you go back to the same webpage, you can see our story map that's embedded. You can also look at it full screen here. And scroll down, you can see the tour projects tab. And here's is where you can go through and see some photos and a little bit of description of all of the other previous projects that we funded. So if you need some kind of mitigation funding support here, but you're not quite sure how to package your project, your proposal, and need some examples, take a look at these previous projects that we've awarded here, just as some examples. This also might be a good time to mention, rather than just talking to us or hearing us talk about what's possible or these projects or the grant program. If you see a project on here that's in alignment with what you want to do and you want to reach out to that community, if you know them, please reach out. If you don't know them, give us a shout and we'll try to connect you with them. I think there's a lot that you guys can do working together and learning from one another there too. So In the interest of time, you can scroll through this, when you get a chance. Let me return back to the slideshow here. Important dates and resources, and we're going to get to the Q&A. We open up the application period January 10th. We're going to close it, as mentioned, 11:59 p.m. March 15th. We're going to announce the awards on or before May 1st. That's our goal. That's our plan. And then it's an annual cycle. So ultimately, by November 3rd, we're going to ask for everything to be closed out. Project done, submit us your reimbursement request, your photo, your final report, all of those things. So all of those dates are important to know about. So now to the Q&A, and I'll direct your attention to the Q&A tool within Zoom. If you do have a question, if you've got some feedback or perspective to share about the grant program, use that Q&A tool. And we'll give a minute to see if any questions come up. And while we're waiting, just another plug. Any questions, comments you guys have, reach out to Camille or I, and we'll be happy to help. All right. Hold on just a second. Let's see. See a question. So the question we got, is there a matching funds thing, or do we require in-kind match, at a volunteer labor cost per hour, for volunteer time? No, there's no match required with this grant program. And now, as in crafting your proposal, if we see, that buy-in piece, if we see that you as a community are also pitching in, some dollars in addition to asking for ours, and that's ultimately going to improve your score in that particular criteria. And we're going to remember, we're going to review your project relative to other projects. So if you've got a project, let's just say on this particular, item here, that where you're pitching in, $10,000 on top of what you're asking us for $10,000 for, and another project is not pitching in that $10,000, then obviously we're gonna, score higher the project where we see that additional increased buy-in. And, also I'll mention, on this question, volunteer time in the state of Colorado per hour, I think it's like $34 an hour or something. We're not going to pay, the community for that time. However, if you think it'll take 10 volunteers, a total of 100 hours, when you craft your proposal, you can do that math to help sort of monetize the volunteer lift or that time that you're putting in. And we'll consider that in the review. Looking through some questions. Yep. One point that may have mentioned is that might have been understood to be required last year, but this year we don't have, like a match requirement. Still apply. My answer still applies there. And Doug, I see your question here. Yes. So the question is, if we ask for $10,000 and it doesn't complete the project, but it partially completes it, maybe it's a longer term thing, or it's a $50,000 project, and it would be helpful to have $10,000, worth to help with that project. Is that eligible? And that answer is yes. And there's been a project in the past that we funded that was it was kind of think of it as a funding gap in a larger project. And the proposal was, hey, can you provide us funding through this mitigation grant program to fill that funding gap? And that's what we did. So that would be a yes. Another question about providing some examples of multiple stakeholders in an unincorporated area. So that could be,
volunteer fire districts.
Yeah.
Support from your local watersheds. We saw a couple of those in our support letters last year. Maybe neighboring HOAs, like you guys are going in on this project together. If truly you just can't find stakeholders, which might go against you in your criteria, but a large number of support letters from your individual community members, and we'll can definitely, supplement that to a certain aspect. So hopefully that gives you a little bit more ideas what we're talking about with stakeholders in that, especially for most of us from like the Wooey area. You're like, who are my stakeholders? That's a tree right down the road. I don't really have another building office.
Yeah, if you're not in if there's no formal HOA or road association or something, then it's just I mean, your neighbors, right? In any given area, it's just your neighbors. Yeah, those little letters of support. Or, maybe another idea or option would be to you guys get together and talk about it, and then just sort of develop a little for lack of a better phrase, like a petition letter or a way for all the neighbors to sign and their address that they support the project. Then that's a useful way to indicate, community support. Another question about getting multiple bids to help with work. It's not required that you get multiple bids. However, we would like to say, of course, that's recommended. Not only is it part of being a good, steward of our taxpayer dollar here to make sure that we get, the best value, it's also smart, for you guys too. You want to make sure that you're getting a good cost estimate for the work you're asking. So
I think that might be a good segue to show the website where different mitigation
yeah,
contracts.
absolutely. Do we have any other questions or?
No, we are.
Okay, and we're
Good.
getting close to 7. Yeah, share the screen. Cool. And I think uh, Raina may be on the webinar here too, but a cool little partnership item that we're working with the sheriff's office on. Go back to our
Our homepage.
yep.
Everything you need for this whole grant application process is going to be under this burnt orange tab. And down here, this wildfire mitigation providers for hire. If you're questioning where to start, or who can even do this work, or maybe you've gotten a wildfire partners program evaluation done, this is a great starting location to, reach out to some of these contacts. And these are just websites that we know work and someone answers and they do good work, and a great starting place for you, especially as you're starting to reach out to contracts and get different multiple bids so you can compare and contrast and get the most bang for your buck.
Yeah, I like it. And quick little note here, sort of a disclaimer. Obviously, we can't recommend one company or provider over the other. Essentially, I think it's fair to say that these folks, if they're on their list, they're familiar with our county's wildfire partners program. So there's been some initial touch base, kind of context there. And also, if you know of anyone else or if any other wildfire mitigation provider, wants to sort of get looped in with some knowledge of our wildfire partners program and listen on this website, then they can complete, a form and we sort of fold them in. That was just a way to coordinate, all of this great work that can be done and to help, you guys as community members know where to start, maybe as to who to ask and who to call and who to get some quotes from.
Yeah, so some of our second year applicants, if there's someone that you worked with well last year and you don't see them on this list, you're more than welcome to continue to work with them this year, or even recommend them and share them this link so they can get that interest form filled out and we can make sure that they're being highlighted here on this website equally.
Cool. Take another.
I think that's
Yep. I think the questions have slowed down and we're 3 minutes, past my promised 7 p.m. there. One last little question. If some of the bids come in after March 15th, deadline, I understand, that question there. Your proposal's got to be in by March 15th. We kind of know about how much things cost. So what we might ask at that point is if you don't have a bid back from a contractor, who you're asking for a cost estimate on a service to be performed by the time the application period closes, give us your best shot at a reasonable estimate. tell us in your proposal that you've asked XYZ contractor or XYZ and ABC contractor. Note that for us. And it's all good. You know, we'll still have a little time, you know, to try to work with you to refine that budget narrative and that cost quote there. So no problem there. All right. I see no other questions. You know, the sort of the last thing I'll mention and say is, you know, thank you guys for joining us this evening. Thanks, Camille, for standing next to me here. And you know, most importantly though, a big thank you guys to your interest and all your efforts to help reduce risk in your community. You know, we recognize that sometimes if you're on this call, then that means you might be assuming the burden of leadership, you know, for your neighbors and for your community for this important work. And we really just, you know, truly, you know, our heartfelt, sincere appreciation for that. And we thank you for it. And as Larimer County residents ourselves, you know, we want to thank you too. So again, last plug, don't hesitate to reach out to us, call, email, text with any questions you might have, and we'll be happy to work with you. And we look forward to reviewing these proposals and hopefully getting some funding awards out, you know, to you guys in the community. So guys have a great evening and thanks for joining. We'll talk to you soon.
Yes.
Bye.